There is a hidden chamber within every human soul, an uncharted territory where the light of consciousness fades into the shadows. This is the realm Carl Jung dared to explore, a place where society's unspoken fears, suppressed desires, and buried traumas reside. It is a land of paradoxes, where the monsters we refuse to face hold the keys to our greatest liberation. What if the very aspects of ourselves we've been taught to deny, suppress, or condemn are the missing fragments of our wholeness? Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious counterpart to our carefully curated personas. It is the repository of everything we deem unacceptable: rage, envy, shame, primal instincts, and even dormant power. But shadow work is not merely an excavation of darkness. It is an alchemical process of integration, where the rejected pieces of the self are reclaimed and transformed into wisdom. This is the forbidden knowledge they tried to bury, not because it is dangerous, but because it is too liberating. Imagine standing before a mirror that does not reflect your face, but rather the silhouette of all you've ever feared becoming. This is the first step in shadow work universal mastery, the willingness to gaze into the abyss and recognize that the abyss gazes back with your own eyes. The journey is not for the faint of heart. It demands courage, for you will encounter the parts of yourself that have been exiled by societal conditioning, religious dogma, and even well-meaning self-improvement mantras. Yet, here lies the great cosmic joke. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the silent guardian of your unlived potential. When we refuse to acknowledge it, it manifests in twisted ways: self-sabotage, toxic relationships, unexplained anxieties, and even physical ailments. But when we dare to converse with it, to sit with its discomfort, we unlock a hidden dimension of emotional intelligence and spiritual awakening. Modern spirituality often peddles a sanitized version of enlightenment, one where positivity reigns supreme, and darkness is banished with affirmations and the law of attraction. But Jung's teachings reveal a more profound truth. True transformation is born from the marriage of light and dark. The divine masculine shadow work, for instance, is not about suppressing rage or vulnerability, but about channeling them into conscious strength. The best dark tarot decks for shadow work do not predict doom. They serve as mirrors, revealing the subconscious patterns that govern our lives. Why was this knowledge suppressed? Because a society that thrives on division, good versus evil, sacred versus profane, cannot afford for individuals to realize their own wholeness. The moment you integrate your shadow, you cease to be easily manipulated by external forces. You no longer project your insecurities onto others. You become sovereign. This is not just psychology. It is a rebellion against the illusions of the ego. The law of assumption may teach you to visualize a better future, but without shadow work, those visions remain hollow, built upon fractured foundations. True manifestation begins within, by facing the darkness you've spent a lifetime running from. So, let us begin this descent, not as victims of our past, but as explorers of the psyche's labyrinth. The path is winding, the terrain uncertain, but the rewards are nothing short of metamorphosis. Would you dare to step into the unseen? The human psyche is not a flat, one-dimensional landscape, but a vast and intricate cathedral, its highest spires kissed by the light of awareness, while its deepest crypts remain shrouded in mystery. Carl Jung's greatest contribution was not merely identifying the shadow, but revealing its role in the grand design of consciousness itself. To engage in shadow work is to become an architect of the soul, reconstructing what has been fragmented by fear, shame, and societal conditioning. At its core, shadow work universal mastery is founded on several immutable truths, each a thread in the tapestry of self-realization. The first is the principle of duality without division, the understanding that light cannot exist without darkness, just as courage cannot exist without fear. Society teaches us to amputate the so-called negative aspects of ourselves, but Jung's psychology reveals that this act of self-mutilation only creates a haunting phantom, the shadow, which grows stronger in exile. Consider the ego, that carefully constructed identity we present to the world. It is not the enemy, but neither is it the whole truth. The ego is the tip of the iceberg, while the shadow is the colossal mass beneath the surface, steering the course of our lives in ways we seldom recognize. When we deny our anger, it leaks out as passive aggression. When we suppress our grief, it hardens into emotional numbness. Shadow work is the art of retrieving these lost fragments, not to glorify them, but to integrate them into a cohesive self. One of the most profound illusions of modern self-improvement is the belief that we can transcend our humanity through sheer willpower or affirmations. The law of attraction, for all its merits, often ignores the subterranean currents of the unconscious. You may affirm abundance, but if your shadow harbors a deep-seated belief in unworthiness, your efforts will be in vain. True manifestation begins in the depths, with brutal honesty, fearless self-inquiry, and the willingness to sit in the fire of discomfort. This is where tools like the best dark tarot decks for shadow work or a shadow work oracle become invaluable. They are not mere divination devices but mirrors, reflecting the symbols and archetypes that dwell in the unconscious. A card like the devil is not a portent of doom but an invitation to examine our chains, the addictions, obsessions, and toxic patterns we mistake for freedom. The hanged man does not signify helplessness but the wisdom of surrender, the sacred pause before rebirth. Another core theme is the dance between the divine masculine shadow work and the wounded feminine. The divine masculine is not the stoic, emotionless patriarch, but the integrated warrior, one who wields strength with compassion, authority with humility. His shadow may manifest as repressed vulnerability or unchecked dominance. Similarly, the wounded feminine may hide in self-sacrifice or manipulative helplessness. Healing these polarities is not about gender, but about restoring balance within. Jung also spoke of synchronicity, the mysterious alignment of inner and outer worlds. When we ignore our shadow, life becomes a series of frustrating repetitions, the same toxic relationships, the same self-sabotaging behaviors. But when we engage in shadow work, the universe begins to conspire in our favor. What once felt like chaos reveals itself as a hidden order, guiding us toward wholeness. Perhaps the most radical truth of shadow work is this: the darkness is not your downfall, but your initiation. PTSD, low self-esteem, and even what we call evil are not final destinations, but signposts pointing toward unmet needs, unloved parts, and unhealed wounds. The path of integration is not about erasing the shadow, but alchemizing it, turning lead into gold, fear into wisdom, pain into power. There is a language older than words, spoken in the flicker of dreams and the echoes of ancient myths. This is the tongue of the unconscious, where symbols dance like firelight on cave walls, revealing truths too profound for ordinary speech. To truly grasp shadow work, we must become fluent in this primordial dialect, the stories that have always known what modern psychology is only beginning to remember. Consider the tale of the Fisher King from Arthurian legend, a ruler wounded in his thigh, his kingdom reduced to a wasteland mirroring his inner decay. No healing could be found until Percival, the pure fool, asked the fateful question, "Whom does the Grail serve?" The answer was the revelation. The Grail served the king himself. Here lies the first great shadow truth. We are both the wounded and the healer. Our personal wastelands, depression, addiction, cycles of failed relationships, are not punishments but invitations. They ask us the same question Percival posed: who does your suffering serve? The moment we realize it serves our own unmet needs, the healing begins. Alchemy provides another potent metaphor for shadow integration. The ancient alchemists sought to transform base metals into gold, not as mere chemistry, but as a mystical mirror of soul work. Their nigredo phase, the blackening, represents the necessary decay of the ego's illusions before transformation can occur. This is the shadow work in its rawest form, the dissolution of who we thought we were to make space for who we might become. When modern seekers use the best dark tarot decks for shadow work, they engage in the same symbolic process, turning the lead of hidden trauma into the gold of wisdom. Greek mythology offers the story of Narcissus, often misunderstood as simply a caution against vanity. The deeper teaching reveals that Narcissus didn't perish from self-love, but from only loving his reflection, the surface image, not the depths beneath the pool. When we obsess over curated personas, through social media, status, or spiritual bypassing, we commit the same error. The shadow work oracle would show us that the pool's dark waters hold our salvation, if we dare to plunge beneath our own reflection. In Eastern traditions, the Hindu goddess Kali embodies the terrifying yet liberating face of the shadow. Tongue lolling, necklace of skulls, she dances on the corpse of the ego. Western spirituality often recoils from such imagery, preferring gentle guides to fierce destroyers. Yet Kali's lesson is essential. Sometimes growth requires the ruthless cutting away of what no longer serves us. Divine masculine shadow work similarly demands we confront our inner tyrant, the part that would rather dominate than feel vulnerable, that chooses control over connection. Dream analysis provides direct access to shadow material. A common dream motif, being chased by a monster, doesn't signal impending doom, but rather that some disowned energy demands integration. The monster is often the exact quality we need to reclaim. The raging beast might hold our untapped power. The weeping ghost may carry our buried grief. As Jung noted, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Modern culture has its own shadow myths. The superhero origin story, trauma leading to power, mirrors the shadow work journey. Batman's cave is not just a hideout, but a symbolic descent into the underworld of his psyche. The Joker is not merely a villain, but the shadow of chaos Batman must reconcile with his rigid order. These pop culture narratives resonate because they tap into archetypal truths about darkness and transformation. Perhaps the most profound shadow narrative is the hero's journey itself. Joseph Campbell's monomyth reveals that every true transformation requires a descent into the abyss, facing the dragon, confronting the shadow. This isn't metaphorical decoration, but the essential structure of growth. Our resistance to this descent creates what psychology facts confirm as projection, accusing others of the very traits we deny in ourselves. The racist fears his own inadequacy. The homophobe battles his own repressed desires. As Jung warned, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. These symbolic narratives all point to one inescapable truth. The shadow is not our adversary, but our most challenging initiator into wholeness. Its darkness is not absence of light, but the fertile soil from which enlightenment grows. The most profound truths remain merely intellectual curiosities until they take root in the soil of daily existence. Shadow work is not meant to be an esoteric practice confined to therapists' offices or late-night philosophical musings. It is a living discipline that rewires how we navigate relationships, career challenges, and even mundane frustrations. To engage with the shadow is to perform alchemy on the lead of everyday suffering, transforming it into the gold of conscious living. The mirror of relationships. Every significant relationship in your life serves as a mirror, reflecting back fragments of your own psyche, especially the parts you've disowned. The colleague who grates on your nerves, the lover who triggers insecurity, the friend whose flaws you judge harshly. These are not random irritants, but messengers from your unconscious. When you feel a visceral reaction to someone, pause and ask, what does this person embody that I refuse to acknowledge in myself? The controlling boss may reflect your own stifled authority. The lazy sibling might mirror your repressed desire to rest. This is projection in action, the shadow's favorite hiding place. The practice here is simple but profound. When emotionally triggered, turn inward instead of outward. Journaling becomes a powerful tool, not to vent, but to excavate. Write down what you dislike about the other person, then reframe each point as a question about yourself. If I'm so bothered by their need for attention, where am I starving to be seen? This is emotional intelligence forged in the fires of brutal self-honesty. Dark Tarot and Shadow Oracles as daily guides. The best Dark Tarot decks for shadow work aren't just for occasional deep dives. They can become daily companions in consciousness. A single morning pull from a shadow work oracle deck, like the Dark Mirror or the Shadowland, can reveal which archetype is active in your day. Pull the Victim card. The universe might be nudging you to notice where you're relinquishing personal power. The Trickster appears. Perhaps it's time to examine where you're deceiving yourself. These tools work because they bypass the ego's defenses, speaking directly in the symbolic language of the unconscious. Sacred rage and divine masculine shadow work. Anger, when repressed, becomes toxicity, passive aggression, resentment, or explosive outbursts. But anger alchemized becomes sacred fuel for boundaries and righteous action. Divine masculine shadow work, relevant for all genders, involves reclaiming healthy aggression, the kind that says no with conviction, protects what matters, and fuels creative drive. Try this practice. When anger arises, don't suppress or blindly act out. Sit with it. Journal it out raw and unfiltered. Then ask, what is this anger protecting? What boundary needs reinforcing? This transforms rage from a destructive force into a constructive one. Shadow work in the digital age. Social media has become the modern shadow battleground. The carefully curated Instagram feed is the persona. The deleted drafts and hidden envy are the shadow. Notice what posts trigger you. The influencer's perfect body might unveil body image wounds, while a colleague's career post could expose professional insecurities. Instead of scrolling past in discomfort, use it as a mindfulness prompt. Why does this bother me? What does it reveal about my unlived life? Even online trolls can be shadow teachers. Their vitriol often reflects the inner critic we've internalized. Shadow money dynamics. Financial struggles frequently have shadow roots. Chronic underearners might harbor hidden beliefs like money corrupts or I don't deserve abundance. Big spenders may be compensating for childhood scarcity. The law of assumption, believing you already have what you desire, fails when subconscious money shadows sabotage it. Try this. Track not just expenses, but emotional triggers around money. Does checking your balance induce dread? Does tipping generously feel uncomfortable? Each reaction points to a money shadow needing integration. The body as shadow archive. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Chronic pain, tension patterns, and even illnesses often correlate with emotional holding. That stiff neck might be unexpressed defiance. Digestive issues could relate to gut feelings you've ignored. Shadow work becomes somatic. Pay attention to where your body tightens during difficult conversations. Breathe into those spaces, asking what emotion is stored there. This bridges psychology and physical healing. Shadow work in community. While deeply personal, shadow work has collective implications. Racism, sexism, and other systemic issues persist because they're fed by millions of unexamined personal shadows. Doing your own work, facing internalized biases, acknowledging privileges, owning projections, becomes social activism at the soul level. Healthy masculinity emerges when men do the shadow work to disentangle strength from domination, vulnerability from weakness. The miracle of shadow integration reveals itself in subtle but profound ways. Fewer emotional triggers, more authentic connections, creative blocks dissolving, a growing sense of inner spaciousness that no external achievement could provide. This is the promise of shadow work universal mastery, not perfection but wholeness. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the fragmented pieces of understanding click into place like an ancient lock yielding to its key. This is the gift of shadow work, not just knowledge, but a fundamental rewiring of perception. What began as an exploration of darkness reveals itself as the only path to true light. The shadow was never your enemy. It was always the unclaimed part of your divinity. The alchemy of completion. Every great mythos understands that the hero must return from the underworld transformed, bearing gifts for the world. Your shadow work journey is no different. The insights gained in those inner crypts, the reclaimed rage that became healthy boundaries, the owned vulnerability that deepened your relationships, the integrated fears that birthed authentic courage, these are your elixirs of transformation. Where once you saw only brokenness, you now recognize the sacred geometry of your psyche. The law of attraction gains new potency when your manifestations aren't sabotaged by unconscious shadows. The affirmations you speak land differently when they're no longer at war with your hidden beliefs. The ripple effect of integration. Your personal shadow work sends shockwaves through the collective unconscious. Every time you resist projecting your insecurities onto others, you disrupt age-old patterns of blame and shame. When you model healthy masculinity that embraces both strength and tenderness, you redefine what it means to be powerful. Your commitment to emotional intelligence becomes permission for others to explore their own depths. This is how cultures shift, not through grand gestures, but through millions of daily choices to face what we'd rather ignore. The best dark tarot decks for shadow work and shadow work oracle tools are more than personal guides. They're artifacts of a quiet revolution in human consciousness. The invitation. Now comes the decisive moment, the threshold between understanding and embodiment. Will you let these insights remain fascinating concepts, or will you allow them to dismantle and rebuild your way of being? The call is simple but profound. 1. Commit to daily shadow spotting. When irritated, ask, what part of me does this reflect? 2. Embrace sacred tools. Let shadow work oracle pulls illuminate your blind spots each morning. 3. Transmute one shadow at a time. That trait you dislike in others? Find and heal its roots in you. 4. Celebrate the cracks. Your flaws are the very places light enters your soul. The most radical act in a world addicted to surface perfection is to embrace your messy, glorious wholeness. Your shadow doesn't make you damaged. It makes you dimensional. The parts of yourself you've been ashamed of, they contain your unique medicine for a fractured world. This is the forbidden knowledge they tried to bury, not because it's dangerous, but because it makes you ungovernable by fear. When you stop running from your darkness, you become unshakable. No manipulative advertisement, toxic relationship, or societal pressure can sway someone who's made peace with their shadows. The dawn is breaking. Will you meet it as a fragmented soul or an integrated being? The choice, as it always was, is yours.